We are here to discuss the Arendal Sound 1528 Tower 8 loudspeaker review. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasallo with AudioHawks. We have a special guest today, Jay Lee. Jay, how are you doing? And we got Don in the house. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you, man. So there's a lot of reasons why we wanted to do this little collab. Number one is I've always checked out your YouTube videos. I really respect the kind of work that you do. You have a lot of enthusiasm. And number two, you seem like a very nice, down-to-earth guy, and we need to bring up the next generation of audiophiles in this space, reviewers. We want to prop them up and push the torch over to them because Don and I aren't that young anymore, right, Don?
Speak for yourself, Mr. Delasallo.
But the other thing, too, is all of my Arendal speakers are stuck in customs.
Right.
So I haven't had a chance to hear them yet. Soon, they're coming soon, and we're going to Michael's Youth Man's on Monday, or at least I am. I don't know if you're joining, Don.
I'm going to try to make it back in time.
We're going to try to hear them firsthand, the 1528s. But Jay, you're the first to review this speaker. In fact, your video was like 43 minutes long, I believe. I watched the whole thing, and it was very positive, very enthusiastic. And I know you got a lot of positive press for it, but you got some haters there. You're always gonna have haters, Jay. That's the reality of the situation. If you're enthusiastic about something, if your energy shows, there's always gonna be haters. And I'm here to tell you, get used to it, man.
Nobody hates me, Joe. It's Gene, you know, nobody
fear you, Don. That's the difference.
Well, they should.
So maybe, Jay, why don't we talk about? First of all, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the negativity here, if you want to address some of that. And then I also want to talk about your background, because the way you come off is you come off as this typical YouTuber that gets a new shiny product, loves the product, but there's a fact that you have a lot of education behind you in your background, a lot of science-based education, and you spent a decent amount of effort, actually a lot of effort, to take the time and measure the speaker. And we're going to go over that as well. But let's just talk a little bit about your review, talk about some of the comments and how you feel about that. Sure.
So first of all, I mean, it's very discouraging every single time, I post a review, and obviously, we get negative comments sometimes saying, hey, you seem like a sellout. How much did they pay you to say that and stuff like that? But, to be honest, the reason I do this is because I love audio products, right? As I'm sure it's same with you, Gene, but I love audio products, and I am literally doing this to share that passion with my audience. And so there are products that come in here where I go, no, this is not something I want to spend time with. Those get sent back. And I know people are saying, hey, you should do a negative review on those products and tell us, what's up. But, unless it's something I can objectively prove that there's something wrong with it, it's just not my taste. It's not my jam. So I don't spend time with those products. So the products that I review and post on my channel are, mostly positive because I love these products, and it's something that I want to showcase and tell my viewers about and spend my time actually reviewing them. And in fact, reviewing one speaker or any product really, takes like a month or longer for me, because I'm trying different amplifiers, this and that, exactly, and measurements. And of course, in talking about measurements, it's limited. I can only do what I can within my means, within what I have as my resources. So, I'm just trying my best to provide what I can to show how excited and great these products are. And of course, that can come across the wrong way for some people, but I can guarantee that the 43-minute video was not sponsored by Arendal. I did not receive any money or the product for that matter for that video. And usually my videos are not 43 minutes long, but I, just kept it 43 minutes long because everything I said there, I stand behind it, right? I had a great experience. I thought it was a crazy speaker for, I know 9,500 is a lot of money, but, there's great measuring speakers. There's great speakers at every different price ranges. This one just happens to be something that really clicked with me at $9,500 that I really haven't seen myself before, and so I got really excited. And of course, there was some backfire, but I did expect that, and I'm okay with that. People can have their own opinions, but I just want to make sure that people understand I'm really coming from the same place that you guys are. Like you guys like audio, I like audio. That's why I talk about things I like. I think it's really kind of like a kind of a natural flow of reason here, right? I don't review watches. So no, in fact, I'll go on a tangent. Some viewer of mine commented, "Hey Jay, you should do a watch channel, or some other hobby. You have great production value. You can make so much more money on YouTube doing other things." I'm like, yeah, but that's not my passion. I would be miserable doing that. So this is what I do because it's what I love. It's not really about the money or about the product, getting it for free and stuff like that. And all the products go back, so it's nothing like that. That's all kind of speculation,
misconception in the industry.
Yeah, and of course, it stems from some trust with influencers, not just in the audio industry, but on YouTube as a whole, right? There's been a lot of scandals of influencers. So I understand where people are coming from and having trust issues. I have no problem with that. I don't expect everyone to just take my word for it, trust me, bro, kind of mentality. But at the same time, it is a bit discouraging when you're really passionate about something. You say, "Hey guys, look at these speakers, look at these, I love them." And people, some of them are, saying you got paid off your ass, you're a sellout, everything you review is positive, all those comments. And even just to reference the 1528 towers, the negative thing about that speaker, I mentioned it in the video. I mean, you can't put this in a small room. I even said my room was too small. Yeah, huge.
The size of that thing.
Just the fact that you have to be in a certain size room is a negative for that speaker. And it was very clearly stated in my review. So it's not like everything was positive. It was a very positive review, but I did, preface that, it is intentioned for a big room, which a lot of people do not have. So, if I want to sell the speakers, I would really say, "Hey guys, it works in a small room, no problem," right?
So Jay, think about when you're talking to the general public, because they don't understand how much work goes into these unboxing, setting them up, listening to them. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot of work. And for a person to create a YouTube channel, to go through all this, to receive product, to set it up, listen, because you love it. And if you're enthusiastic about it, it's probably a great product. There's very few products that come through that aren't at least good. But every now and then you get one that's exceptional and you get excited about it. And I dig it, man.
Well, Don, too, it's you and I, we vet what we want to review, right? Because you and I collectively have like 60 years of experience in the industry, man. So we'll look at a product, we'll be like, man, that looks like something that would be interesting to review it. Let's review it. But if we see something that looks disastrous, it's got tweeters on both sides of the cabinet or something crazy like that, we avoid that product and we try to focus on the stuff that looks like it could be well engineered.
How excited were we years ago when we first saw per listen? We're like, we got to review that. We got to review it before anything came out on it.
Yeah.
And that's why you guys go to shows, right? I think I first met Gene briefly at the Florida show, or maybe not. I don't know. I came across you at a show, and that's why we go to shows. The AGD amplifier that I'm rocking right now, I only found it because I decided to go to the Florida show. I didn't know about them before. So again, I think it's a matter of time as well, right? I wish I can just review everything that comes in here, negative or positive, but I really don't want to torture myself. That's not the purpose of my channel. I like to enjoy music, and the last thing I want to do is sit down and listen to something that I absolutely hate and then make a video on why I hated it.
Time is a luxury we don't have. So we got to use it
wisely. Okay, Kurt.
So I just wanted to address, James is getting the 1528 monitors. I'm getting the 1528 bookshelves. When they're released from customs, they've been sitting in customs for 6 or 7 weeks. It's not the fault. This is not a problem that a consumer buying a 1528 is going to have. This is a problem with prototypes coming to us before the release, going through customs. It's been a mess, and we're trying to get through it. Luckily, Jay didn't have that problem, and Michael, Youthman, he got the towers, and he still doesn't have the. I
actually did have that problem, but we had to do a lot of work to get that thing across customs in Canada, and it was not an easy process. So I'm right there with you on that one. It's just a nightmare logistically.
Well, one of you, because our reviewers may not know you too well, why don't you give a little background? Because I know you're working on a PhD, you have a master's degree. Give us a little background on what you do. You do research. Talk a little bit about your background.
So my background is undergrad undergrad degree in neuroscience and human biology. I was normally going to go to med school. I got into med school. I decided not to go and actually pursue this. And then meanwhile, I was working at a store called Audio Excellence, where my old professor reached out to me, and I decided to take on a research job where I did my master's while doing the research job, and the rest is kind of history. But really, I mean, my channel has nothing to do with my kind of science background, so I don't really mention it as much. Again, I think I mentioned to you on a Facebook chat before, Gene. The last thing I want to do is come back home and do the same thing I'm doing at work. So this is really my getaway. This is my passion. This is my kind of thing, and I have no intentions of propping myself up based on my background in education per se. And again, my channel isn't like yours, more concentrated in professional measurements. I just do the best I can in providing, it's like more a show and tell with my friends. That's how I see it.
Well, you have a very humble approach to audio, and it's very refreshing too. I just love the enthusiasm. I want to talk a little bit about your experience. One thing that really stood out when you did the 1528 review is you said something that Don and I have always talked about for years. I think you've articulated it better than I could. You talked about the grand scale of a larger speaker, the soundstage it presents. It's not just the fact that it could play louder. Even at normal listening levels, the way a large tower that has so much dynamic capability, even at low listening levels, just presents differently in the grandness of the soundstage. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because you highlighted that multiple times in your review.
Yes, and the reason I highlighted it multiple times is because, how do you articulate that, right? How do you express a bigger sound of scale? And the best kind of thing that I thought of was when you hear the sound coming from a small person like myself, a thin, small stature, versus someone much bigger, we could be singing the same note, but I mean, it's gonna sound way bigger in scale from a bigger person. Just like a bigger acoustic instrument sounding bigger than a smaller acoustic instrument. So that's kind of like how I see the loudspeakers as well. The bigger speakers just have this scale and sound that is just simply different from a smaller speaker. I mean, the 1528 bookshelf speakers I have behind me, those are absolutely excellent for my room. I'm enjoying it immensely, and I think it's actually a better fit for my room. But the towers, it just has the scale and dynamics that's just even in the vocals, it's just so powerful. And to convey that in subjective, it requires some excitement, and it requires some finessing of words to to make people understand that. Because again, this is not something that you can just show off in a measurement, at least within my capabilities. So
no, it's difficult. And to be honest with you, you can get a large soundstage from like a line array type of speaker. But in my experience, and Don, you've heard a lot of line arrays in the past, sometimes line arrays could sound too grand, almost unnatural in the presentation. It doesn't sound like it's not hyper focused enough. And one thing that you talked about, Jay, is you had that larger scale of sound, but you still had that pinpoint imaging. You still had that strong phantom center, which means the speakers were imaging really precisely. And that's hard to pull off on a giant speaker that's got multiple drivers in it. So they put a lot of technology and a lot of engineering into the speaker. And I definitely want to go over the measurements with you. I want to show some pictures with everybody. And Don, I don't know if you have any, what are your comments, Don, about just in general dealing with speakers with large scale of sound?
One of the things I found, I'm a professional audio video designer, installer. So I've done literally hundreds of theaters and systems, 2-channel systems. We still do. And what I found that matching a speaker to a room, nobody ever talks about that. Ever go to audio shows and they got big, massive speakers in the 12 by 12 or 13 by 12 rooms? They can overpower, because the speaker's creating energy and can overpower a room. I think a lot of the systems that are small towers or bookshelves in the smaller rooms do a great job. I don't know if I'd put those big Arendals in a small room. It sounds cool, but as you turn it up and you create all that energy in the room, you might be better off with a little bit smaller scale speaker and maybe a subwoofer. So there's a lot of validity that I found I've experienced in that, where I've had big bookshelves or small towers sound better than a flagship speaker even sometimes because of the room.
Yeah, that's a good point, Don. I'm going to share the screen here, Jay. You can kind of walk us through these images. I absolutely love your room. I think it's unbelievable. I love the Asian decorations here on the sidewall. I mean, that's just, it looks like a room I would just want to
awesome.
I want to chill in this room. I love the vinyl on the floor. I love all the wood. I love the diffuser. Did you make those diffusers?
So those diffusers were made by one of my Patreon that I got in contact with. He was somewhat local, so he drove to me, and we figured that out together. And he helped me put it up, and I believe that wall is 420 pounds collectively, and it would have costed me, I mean, so much more money.
Thousands,
if he didn't help out. So I really wanted to do that. And by the way, I have to give credit where credit is due. That wall was inspired by Sonos Faber's listening room. They have the similar quadratic diffusers. And, Gene, you mentioned, it's a room that you want to chill in. That's exactly what I do in this room, right? This is a room that I chill in. I don't really look at YouTube as particularly work or something that I have to do, but something that, I just relax, listen to.
It doesn't pay very well.
I like the Ames chair. Is that an Ames knockoff, or is it an actual genuine Ames?
That is a knockoff. Actually, people ask me a lot about it.
I have one too.
Yeah, I mean, I can't justify the real one, so I bought a knockoff. And actually, YouTube removed it because it's not allowed to talk about knockoffs. But
interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah. So just to go over some of these pictures. By the way, your photography work is excellent. I love the camera work you do here.
Yeah, the lighting's perfect. It's great.
There's a lot of cool stuff to talk about with this speaker. We actually did an interview with Thomas. I don't want to butcher his last name, Godalvison from Arendal Sound. We talked about the design of the 1528. The cool thing here is the waveguide on the tweeter. That's a first. Well, no, they had a waveguide on the 1723. This is more of an elliptical waveguide. I love the fact that they got that tweeter so close to the mid-range, so it just acts more like a point source. And let me see if there's a picture closer up of it. Yeah, there you go.
Beautiful design. I mean, just to look at it, it's like a work of art. They just killed it on this. I don't care. Aesthetically.
Yeah. I love that tweeter. It's so refined. And I use that word a lot. All that really means for me is that it has all the details, but it doesn't shred my ears.
Yeah, it's not bright.
It's refined like me, like a fine wine.
Yes, sir.
More like that, yes. So the cool thing about this tweeter is this is the first I've heard of a lithium magnesium compound for a tweeter. I know I talked to Thomas about it, and the reason why they went this route as opposed to beryllium is it's an easier tweeter to source. The metal is easier to source. There's like 1 or 2 supplies of beryllium, so that could be a challenge to get. And the lithium magnesium, they claim it's lighter than beryllium, but I think you're splitting hairs because beryllium is already extremely light.
Yeah, they said something like 1/3 the density. But you're probably right.
If there's any chemist, that can go over the chemical formula of that versus beryllium and tell us about the weight of it, I'd be interested in knowing.
I know one more speaker that has the lithium magnesium tweeter, and that's Usher's flagship speaker.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so I found that interesting because it's the only other speaker that has a tweeter like this.
Yeah, no, it's very cool that they went to this level of detail, and there's even some function to this grill over the tweeter. It's not just for protecting the tweeter itself. It's actually to, I guess, reduce some of the different frequencies from beaming. It's kind of like what Paradigm does with a PPT
few
line.
companies do that, Gene.
Yep. That's the mid-range. I'll see. Do you have a picture of the mid-range without the grill? The grill.
No, that thing doesn't come off.
Oh, it doesn't come off. Okay, it doesn't come off. Well, one thing about
my beer. No.
One thing about the mid-range that's really cool, Jay. I don't know if you know this, but again, talking with Thomas, so that mid-range driver is a very narrow band driver. It's a sealed basket. They did it sealed so they can increase the sensitivity and increase the output of it. And within its bandwidth, now it doesn't play as wide bandwidth as the dual 8s from the 1723, but within its operational bandwidth, it has more output capability than those two 8s, which is incredible. They told me that thing will put 130 dB output before it blows up.
What?
Just the mid-range. So that just goes to show you that this thing means business. It's meant to play loud. It's meant to play effortless at loud levels and at low levels too.
As loud as it can play with a single tweeter.
Yeah, well, that's a heavy duty tweeter. And then there's 4 8s, right, Jay? Yeah, 4 8s.
Yes.
Wow.
I like how they covered I like the faceplate over the whole baffle. You know how it kind of hides us around, and it just kind of looks like one fluid design, and the curvature of the speaker itself. Now, when you were setting this up, you found the axis of integration of the speaker was actually not at the tweeter; it was below the tweeter.
Yes.
Where exactly did you find the best measurements when you measure this?
So actually, right above, so it's in between the mid-range driver and the first woofer.
Yeah.
But it was just above the woofer, so not exactly in the middle. So that's where I found it to have the best axis. Yeah. Oh,
there's the grills. Those are the grills for the woofers, right?
Correct.
Now the ports on the bottom.
Yeah. That was the biggest challenge, was flipping the speakers to measure the port.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's similar to the Perlissons. They put the port on the bottom. That allows them to put a much longer port tube, and also it loads to the ground. So it acts as a high pass filter, so you don't hear any chuffing. There's a lot of advantages.
Go to the RBH SVTRs, Gene. I mean, you know, some of the finest design.
Yeah, you're right. Now, when
Gene,
Gene,
if you can go back to the previous slide, that is actually a picture in motion. So that's woofer is pushed out.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show that because I thought it was cool. I don't know.
very, very interesting. Now, when you listen to these speakers, did you listen to them just with the speakers, or did you actually have those subs going too?
No. So initially, I did have the subs going. It was I had a mini monitor that I was reviewing before this, and I had it on. I dialed the crossover point down to about 40, 50 hertz. And then I turned it off because, I mean, it was overloading the room. And so there was no way I could have my subs on in this room with those speakers. So
yeah,
first time actually, first time where I was like, nope, no subs, not for this one.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna send you some Sherwin Vegas. That'll change your mind.
Jay, what are we looking at here, man? What are we looking at here?
So that is the inside of the port. So I didn't have this picture when I made the review video because I didn't have any help to turn the speaker around. But when I was measuring the port, I thought, why don't I just take some pictures to show people what I'm talking about? Because in the video itself, I mentioned how there's small holes with materials filled inside to fight port resonance. And that's just one of the many measures they made on the speaker to fight port resonance, because the port is quite long. If you see inside of speakers, there's actually braces along the port holding it down, which something I haven't really seen done in many speakers before. So I thought the attention to detail was fabulous.
Attention to detail, just on the port.
Exactly.
I mean, think about that. I mean, that says a lot to me right there.
That is, I didn't even know about that with the ports. That's very cool. And
it's super cool.
That's a great countermeasure for a long.
The little things. It's a synergy of 1,000 cuts that make something. You know what I mean? That's awesome.
Can you guys see the picture here, the crossover?
Hey, Danny would approve of
that one. I mean, I hope so. Because
I ain't never getting none of those in here.
There's no cheese on this crossover. In fact, this is just the bass driver crossover, right, Jay? You couldn't get to the mid and tweeter.
Yes. No, those were, I think, inside the cabin itself. But another thing that I want to point out, of course, there's the resistors and error core inductors and capacitors, all high grade. But if you actually look under, I couldn't capture in the camera or the photos because it's hard to do so. If you look right where the nuts are, the bolts that the crossover is, if you look under it, you can see the materials that is connecting the crossover. And according to Arendal, none of them are, they're all non-ferrous magnet materials. right?
Yeah,
So
good.
as Danny says, right, no
Ferros.
steel nuts, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I found that to
Well,
be interesting. They took that extra step there.
well, this just goes to show you that this speaker means business. I mean, those are very high power resistors. Those aren't the typical sandcast resistors you see on more budget friendly speakers. They
Right.
put them on standoffs. That's another little engineering detail probably people would notice. It keeps the heat away from the PWB. So that's just another
Dean, you
great
know what this
detail.
reminds me of is the per listen crossover and
Yeah,
even the JTR crossover. They're
it's
like
on that
works of
level for
art.
sure, Don.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
high end, real true high end.
really thick gauge inductors. They're all orthogonally located, so they're not interfering with each other. I mean, it's just a good layout. I can't see the part tolerances, but I'm guessing 5% on these, or maybe less on some critical components. I can't really tell, but overall,
I think it was 3, but don't quote me
oh
on that.
wow. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at this price level. I wouldn't be surprised. You had something with a jumper here. You want to talk about the jumper because yours didn't have the ability to use
Look
this
at the
feature.
binding post.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think Gene, you mentioned it as well, but I think you and I are not particular fans of this feature per se.
Yeah.
But I think it's still good to have. And one thing that people see this and go, where's the bass control? Well, if you put the both of them on high setting, both the mids on and the high frequency on high setting, then you reduce the bass, right? And vice versa, when you put the low, you increase the bass. So you can put both of them that way and adjust the bass level as well. But another cool thing about again, attention to detail, those jumpers are rhodium plated pure copper, oxygen free copper, right? So again, no steel nuts, as James is laughing about how I said that. Yeah, but yeah, I love the details. I love the the little things like that. I think it's a really standout on this product.
Look at the binding post on those, man.
Yeah, same thing. Rhodium plated copper.
So we get so many high end speakers, so many speakers of all kinds that. So the Audioholics family, and Jay, I hope you join in with us because every day we talk about audio. This is what we live. I mean, like we do. And so we see a lot of different products and speakers, and binding post seem like an inconsequential thing, but the better speed, that's beautiful, man. I mean, seriously, you know what I'm saying? It's just the little details on every aspect.
It does, Don. It matters. I measured contact resistance of crappy ones. When I measured the NAD M23 amplifier, which uses the Purify Class D module, the distortion was so low on that amplifier. We're talking to the tenths of a thousandths place to the right of the decimal point.
Cleanest amp you've ever measured, right?
I couldn't replicate it with my test setup because I was using these crappy steel alligator clips for years. As soon as when I switched those out and I changed my cabling up, I used twisted pair. I was able to replicate the manufacturer's measurements because we're talking down to the hair on a gnat's ass when you're trying to measure that level of distortion. So every little thing matters. I'm as much as I'm a measurement guy, I'm also a person that appreciates finer constructed stuff, even if it's overkill. You can, in my opinion,
it's a piece of furniture. This is an instrument, a piece of furniture. I mean, you wouldn't buy a crappy made piano. You wouldn't want to. I mean, that stuff matters. Everybody is so obsessed with measurements, and absolutely measurements matter. But what matters also is how the speaker looks. It's in your room. It's presentation. It's the quality of the product as well as the sound.
There we go. We got a new standard. So Jay, just a comment on the jumpers. I understand why Arendal did it. A lot of high-end companies do it. Even Revel does it with the Salon 2s. They have the jumpers. It's for people that don't believe in tone controls. They want to tweak the speaker at the speaker rather than the tone controls. My personal take is I embrace more the modern. I rather do any type of tone and manipulation in the digital domain in the processor if you can. Not in the analog domain. So I would rather put shelving filters to taste, bass and treble. But that's just me. But I can understand an audio purist that wants to maybe buy a Macintosh amp that doesn't have tone controls, that's old school, and they just want to tweak it. And they have the option here to do that. It makes the crossover way more expensive, by the way, to do this.
Yeah. Actually, I also, for those that wants to know, it's plus minus 2 dB. So it's not drastic. It's just like a small change. So you might still want to EQ if your room has reflective surfaces and and stuff like that. Hopefully not, but
Wow.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Wow.
So let's go over your measurement photos here. I don't know if that's the first one. Yeah, let's go here. So you actually took a 175 pound speaker.
170, yeah.
107. Jay, I'm no offense, but you probably weigh about a $150 wet. And you took
the speaker weighs probably more than me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I commend you for taking that effort, taking the risk for a $10,000 speaker, bringing it outside, propping it up like you did, and you even put like a little platter, I think, right? So you can
like
turn
Spider-Man
Yeah.
picking more than his body weight up. Come on, Jay.
Yeah,
you had,
exactly.
you know
Well,
you had.
I did. So I did ask Arendal, because again, the speakers are not mine. I did ask Arendal, hey, can it get damaged? And they were like, hey, we don't care. This is a prototype. You do whatever you need with
Wow.
it. And of course, I tried to be careful, but I definitely had help with this. By the way, I didn't lift this by myself up there, so I have to give credit to my friend. But but yeah, we almost died like 12 times. Yeah.
All in the love of audio. Is this the platter that you used to
you need to be a strong Viking to lift our speakers.
So that's the lazy Susan, so that I can take the off-axis measurements, horizontal off-axis measurements.
I'll play the video.
And yeah, it's just the industrial grade, so it doesn't. And then I just slide that right under, and it will allow me to twist the speakers, 15, 30, 20, 45 degrees. Yeah.
Congrats on having an Earthworks microphone, by the way. That's not the typical UMM6 or U mic 1. This is a very high output microphone, very accurate, very calibrated microphone. So commend you on that. That's a great mic.
Yeah, that one, that was an investment that I decided to make when I took on doing measurements more seriously on my channel, especially with speaker reviews. I don't have the same capability as you do, Gene, for measurements with amplifiers and so on. But with speakers, I thought I would continuously provide it from then on. So I took that purchasing decision.
Jay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying that's 8 foot.
8 foot to the tweeter from the ground. Yeah.
The tweeter. Yeah.
I commend anybody that is going to put the effort towards measurements, because we need more data points. We can't just have one or two people in the industry doing measurements. I respect everybody's ability to do measurements, and it's just great when you could collectively look at Stereophile or you guys or us or even Aaron or Amir, all those guys. They all provide useful information to the consumer. I commend it. I welcome it. There's no reason why there should be negative feelings when people do measurements or they disagree. They should just be happy that we're providing these data points.
The internet, dude. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. You could have a goose that laid golden eggs and somebody would hate it. I mean, that's just human nature and pettiness that people have. It is what it is.
Is that a laser pointer that you measured the distance? Is that what?
Yeah. So yeah, I measure it with the measuring tape, but also I do it with the laser. The laser, I think if you go to the next slide, it just allows me to, you see the little red laser there. Make sure that I'm, on point there. And I actually like to do it a little bit under because the laser is sitting on top of the microphone. So I bring it slightly down below the tweeter. And that's the measurement that I do. And of course, it's limiting. When I do this, by the way, all my neighbors, bug me. They come and they go, "What are you doing? What is this?" You see two guys, lugging up a 175-pound speaker on a pallet, and then bringing out microphones and stuff like that. People question your sanity. So
Jay, do you give them the face you have on your thumbnail?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I just tell them,
back off.
Yeah, I just tell them I'm taking some measurements of the speaker, and they're like, play some music, and I'm just like, I mean, sure. But yeah, it's a really fun process. And Gene, I just want to say, when I was doing the when I was doing this, I was curious as much as my audience was on how this speaker measured, because I was hearing some really good sonic characteristics. So I was stoked to get this measured, right? So this was, just something that I really wanted to do. So I took it outside, and of course, some people thought I took it in a in-room measurement. Not the case. That would give
I thought your measurements were in room. I was like, that's why I contacted you. I was looking at your measurements. I'm like, these are really precise measurements for in room. I want to know what your trick is. And then that's when we started talking about this. I'm like, that's it.
Right.
I have to have you on my channel, Jay.
Yeah, the trick is that it's not in room. Yeah, and of course, matching the height with the microphone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into the actual measurements. Let me get back to that folder. And again, I really appreciate you sharing this with us here, Jay.
No problem.
All right, so this is the horizontal off axis, and it's from on axis all the way to 45 degrees, right?
Yeah, so it's on axis with the tweeter, and that'll become more relevant when we talk about the listening axis and so on later. But this is the horizontal off axis at the tweeter level, so 8 foot off the ground. And I mean, as you can see, it's very, very good.
Well, let me ask you a question now, because you did some gating in the measurement.
Yes.
So the gating, depending on the window you selected, I'm guessing it's accurate to 200 to 300 hertz.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you get the bass after that?
So to get the bass, so this measurement is called a quasi-anechoic measurement. It's used by, like people like John Atkinson is from Stereophile and so on. So it's not an anechoic measurement, but it, I like to say it gets pretty close to an anechoic measurement when I compare some of the measurements that I've taken in the past and then compare it side by side. It gets very close. It's not exactly the same, but it gives you the general idea. And so what you do after you gate the frequency is you take near field measurements of the woofer. There's also an equation for that on the distance that you have to abide by. So you get close to the woofer, and basically why you do that is because it takes the room out of the equation, and you're measuring just the woofer's response. And then you take the port and you do the same thing. You don't stick the microphone inside the port, but you take a near field measurement of that as well. And then you sum the both of them together to get the final bass graph. And then you splice that in with the gated response to get the full picture. And where you splice that is some people call it guesswork, and it is to some degree, but there is a formula for that as well, which most people don't follow, that they do when they do these kind of measurements. They don't really follow that. So you kind of eyeball it, and it is guesswork. But what I personally do is I take averaging in-room responses in my room, and then I combine them, and then just make sure that it's close to what I have, along with the manufacturer's posted measurements as well to double check. And I always send it to the manufacturers to double check if my measurements are what they would expect, or if they see something out of whack.
And that's the way to do it, Jay. Every time I do measurements, whether it's loudspeakers or amplifiers, I send my entire test report to the manufacturer before I publish to say, hey, this is what I got. Can you confirm? Can you see if there's any problem with the product? Or sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I make a mistake. I forget to turn on a feature on my audio precision, and the measurement is off. I had to do a secondary supplementation to a Marantz piece that I measured. And the first set of measurements were still good, but they weren't as good as they could have been if I would have turned off some stupid feature that was buried in a menu. But if I didn't check that with Japan, I would have never known. So I went and I did a second video. And this is why I know there's a lot of conspiracists out there. Don't share your stuff. Post it right away. Don't ever go to the manufacturer. That's a bunch of BS, because the companies that are making these products, it's their labor of love. These engineers that are behind these products, I think it's a disservice to bash a company, or if your measurements aren't verified or duplicated. I think it's a disservice to the manufacturer. I always like to have a confirmation, whether it's through another peer reviewer or through the engineers that design the products. And in fact, when I looked at your measurements and then I looked at the ones on Arendal's website, yes, they're not perfectly matched, but the shape is really close. I mean, the fact that what you had to do this, as opposed to Arendal, who has an anechoic chamber, that speaks volumes for just how much care you took into ensuring you got some accuracy in your measurements.
And also, Gene, I will add that this is not a measurement technique that I came up with. This is something that I've seen engineers, designers do. I mean, Danny does the same thing from GR Research, except that he doesn't splice in the base measurements. He just gates it, right? So this is nothing new. I'm just doing basically double checking the manufacturer's work. And of course, it's not going to be as accurate as anechoic chambers or clipple machines. But again, it follows the general trend. And if you take the effort to put the speakers up high to gate the response so that you get a pretty accurate response, then it will, and double check with the manufacturer, it is still a valid measurement. At least I think so.
No, I used to do measurements like this before I had James Larson. Now that I have James going outside and putting speakers 6-7 feet in the air, I just turn all that work over to him at this point, man. I just having someone consistently do this is just a treasure. I did want to point out a couple of things in the measurement. Number one is I saw this online. I saw people disparaging this product, that the bass rolled off pretty steep, at like 50 or 60 hertz. I saw people saying, how could a speaker with 4/8 roll off the bass like that? What they don't realize is the Arendal measurements are anechoic. Then there's no gain from the room in there. And in fact, depending on the size of the chamber they use, there could be excessive roll off, because you need a really large chamber to measure accurately down to 20 hertz, unless they do a compensation for it, which very few manufacturers do when they use anechoic chambers. Even Revel, I don't think, does that when they do the measurements in the anechoic. But if you look at the slope of this roll off below 60 hertz, it's pretty shallow. It's, what is it, Jay? I can't see it with great detail. It looks like it's about second order.
Yeah, it's very it's a very it rolls off very gradually, and if you put it into a room, you'll probably gain about 6 dB per octave, and really that's what I experienced in my room. Like this was a full range speaker in my room. So people see the graph and it's not a flat line down to a 20, doesn't mean it's not a full range speaker,
Right.
Yeah, you're taking advantage when you have a shallow roll off and you have drivers that can handle the output. You're going to get room gain, and you're going to get way more bass extension. Like you noticed in your room, you were probably flat to 20 hertz or close to it, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was flat to 20 hertz when I was doing the average in-room responses. I should have included that, but it was flat down to 20.
Sure. So now, all right. So those were the horizontal 0 to 45 degrees. Now talk about the vertical here.
Yeah. So this is where I found something interesting. So vertical off axis, I took one above the tweeter level. So if you were standing, above the tweeter. By the way, this is not possible with my mother because the speaker is actually, about her height. So if you were sitting, above the speakers, which you will never, you don't want to do that with the speaker, and you can see that, in the off-axis measurement here.
But Jay, if you're dancing to the music of them, you're going to be above them, so that's important.
Exactly, So, but I mean, you can still see that it's not horrible, considering all things. I've seen much worse speakers. Yeah, but the rest of the vertical off-axis response looks pretty good. What did bother me a little bit was that slight rise, still not a big concern, still within the plus minus 5 dB range, but that 1 kilohertz region was particularly bothering me because that's not something I saw in the Arendal's measurement. So I was thinking, what could it be? And then I moved the microphone down to the point that we were talking about before, Gene, right between the tweeter and the first woofer. The mid woofer and the first woofer, and that's the point where you see in the orange line where it just is beautiful. I mean, if I've ever seen a beautiful frequency graph, that's the one. So, and that was personally my experience as well. And, because nobody is going to be listening to the speaker at the tweeter height. It's way up high. And because of the baffle shape, it's shaped to kind of point the tweeter and the mid woofer down and make all the woofers align. So really, Arendal suggests minimum of 2.5 meter listening distance and an optimal 4 meter distance. I was sitting around 3 meters, and I was getting great results. But like I said in my video, I saw a huge limitation of my room with the speaker. I just wanted to really hear the speaker in a big room because that would have been just absolutely magical. So that's what I found, is that when I moved the microphone down, I got a more consistent response with Arendal's response.
And again, like you said, that orange trace is about where you'll be listening to the speaker when you're sitting down.
Right.
Which is very linear. So this is the bass drivers, right? This is you. I wanted you to do some near field measurements because I wanted to look at the out of band behavior of the drivers, because this is something that I really enjoy some of the stuff Danny does when he shows you the breakup modes and areas in the crossovers that could be improved. When you look at something like this and you look at the bass driver, and now these are stiff cone drivers. So stiff cone drivers, if they're not properly damped, whether you do that in the surround or you do that in the material over the metal cone, or you do it in the crossover, you want to prevent the ringing. And if you look at this decay of frequency over as you go up in frequency and it just kind of rolls off, there's nothing nasty going in the out of band here. I've seen speakers, aluminum cone driver speakers that have no crossover element on the bass driver, and it just breaks up in the 4 or 5 kilohertz region. And you won't necessarily see that in a summed response anechoic of the whole system, but you'll hear it and it becomes fatiguing at loud listening levels. And when I look at this graph of the woofers, you could see that it's really well behaved. What do you think about that, Jay?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely beautiful. Sometimes I take multiple near field measurements because sometimes it's not consistent. Sometimes something's going on, and I scratch my head going, why is this happening? And then later, it's multiple issues. But with this, it took really 1 or 2 measurements just to double confirm. And I looked at it and I just thought this was an impeccable response. And again, with the port. Again, you can seal the speakers, as I mentioned before, with the big foam plug. And that's exactly what you would get is that green kind of graph right there. But with the port, you get a more gradual roll off. Again, if you want to put in a big room and have that 6 dB per octave gain, without the foam, that's what you would get. So, again, I think this is a great speaker, through and through.
A speaker like this, I would not recommend in 95% of cases to seal the ports, and I would not run them with bass. I would not bass manage a speaker like this. I would run a full range. I mean, that's what
exactly.
I agree.
Yeah.
Why not take?
You're kind of wasting it.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the listening axis that we were talking about. This is where you found the best summation of the speaker, and that is an incredibly linear response.
Yeah, I mean, it's like within plus minus 2 dB.
Good heartbeat. Or a bad heartbeat.
So this is the really interesting one to me. This is the mid range, and I was worried about this one. And this is where some companies just fall on their face when they don't do proper integration of the crossover. They cheap out on the parts and they don't put enough parts in it to bandwidth limit that driver. Look at how well controlled this driver is within its bandwidth. Yeah, it's very linear. There's no breakup that you could see out to 20 kilohertz. This is just a great response. Clean response.
I mean, it's beautiful.
Very cool. So what is this, Jay? Tweeter level.
So because there's a lot of squiggly lines, I wanted to make let people know what I talked about before with the one that was measured at the tweeter level and one that was measured at the listening axis, the one that was listening height between the mid woofer and the first woofer. So the orange line is what most people would be hearing. The purple line is the one that is at the tweeter level, right?
Yes,
so if you measure the speaker like a normal speaker, you would, then you're gonna get that, little bump around 1 kilohertz. So,
and some people might like that. Some people might like a more forward mid range. So yeah,
they might, but I personally don't like that 1 kilohertz. I was like, that's not what I was hearing. What's going on here?
Well, I remember what you said in your video that you actually, even though you want an accurate monitor, if you're like critically monitoring music, you actually your preference in actual playback is something that has a little bit of a recessed area in the mid range, right? That's why you like that one monoacoustic speaker, because it was a little more recessed in that region. Yeah. So why don't you explain what's going on here with this waterfall?
This I finessed last night after talking to you. Actually, the one that I posted on Facebook and other social media was wrong because, well, it's not wrong, but it was the 500 millisecond. Someone rightfully corrected me saying that it should be 5 millisecond, and so now we have a time window of 5 millisecond. The reason for that was because, of course, I use Windows and it doesn't save my freaking settings every single time I come back to it. So I mistakenly posted that, but this is the correct one, and as you can see, it's actually even more impressive than the one that I posted. This is zoomed in, and it's very clean. I mean, anyone can see this. There's no ringing, and I think personally that's what I personally associate with perhaps that refinement of the tweeter, right? There's really low distortion, no ringing. It extends well, and so this airy, high resolution sound that I was hearing without no fatigue, even though like you mentioned, Gene, it doesn't necessarily have that upper mid-range dip that I usually like. This is probably one of the reasons why, it's how I feel.
So just to put things in perspective, if the speaker had problematic resonances, you wouldn't see a waterfall at this clean. You would see like a decay. You would see it just
so
overhanging.
This is 5 milliseconds, right? So that's 5 milliseconds. So if there was ringing or something, you will see squiggly lines coming out of it, and you can see those kind of measurements quite often with speakers. And sometimes manufacturers, when I ask them about it, they'll say, hey, we did that on purpose for tuning, to give a little different sound signature and this and that. But with this speaker, it's just absolutely clean. I mean, I would personally use this for studio monitors as well. But that's why I got really excited, Gene, because I've never had a speaker where I would use it both for studio purposes and musical enjoyment. Those two things were always separate for me. This speaker filled both of them, both requirements, just like that. So I mean, I really loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, there's some questions in here. We'll try to get to them. Someone was asking about the electronics you used for these speakers. I can't find that question now. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you use to power them? Because these are 4-ohm speakers, and let me just, before you get into that, let me just explain one thing. So these speakers are less efficient than the 1723 series. The 1723 have about 3 dB more sensitivity. They're THX certified. So with 1 watt, they'll play 3 dB louder than this speaker. That doesn't mean that this speaker can't play as loud. It just needs more power to play as loud. And in fact, the thermal limits of the speaker is higher than the 1723. So this thing can actually play louder if you throw a big amplifier at it. Like I was telling you guys, that mid-range can hit 130 dB before it fails. Everything in this speaker is designed to handle lots of power. So if you, Don, in this case, you'd want to throw like a Levinson amp at a speaker like this, right? You'd want to throw like a really kick-ass amplifier.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have to have a Levinson, which is a great
I say amp. Get a Levinson.
Like I would say like Class A or Macintosh, or I mean, whatever big boy, or some of the Class Ds that are out now. I don't know how you feel about Class D, Jay, but most of my amps now are Class D, and I'm absolutely loving them. Absolutely loving the sound. But yeah, I would think if you're going to drop 10 large on a pair of speakers, that you'd put some ass behind it, right?
Yeah. So actually, you mentioned Class D. One of my reference amplifiers that I'm currently using right now and then have enjoyed for the last 2 years or so is the AGD GONFET amplifier. So I have the Audion monoblocks. And that's the first thing that I tried with the Arendal 1528 towers. I will say particularly for my room, I didn't need a lot of power because, it's a small room.
Small room, yeah.
Exactly. Right. But for a bigger room, I would definitely want at least like something like the Grand Vivace, something higher output power. But at the same time, 89.5 dB sensitivity, even though it's a 4-ohm speaker, I threw some tube amplifiers in there. In my room, it was singing and, giving me some tube characteristic that I really like. So I played multiple different amplifiers, through this and that. I think I must have went through like 4 or 5 different systems before I, stopped to do other things. So from Class A to Class AB to, tube amplifiers to Class D amplifiers, I mean, you name it. It did a phenomenal job in my room. But of course, if you're in a big room that these speakers are meant for, then you would want, I think, I'm generalizing here, but I think you would at least want about 200 watts.
Oh, absolutely. So not to divert too much, but you did a video comparing like the Macintosh 352 with, I guess, the company you used to work with or whatnot, with the other Macintosh integrate. I'm going to try to pick up a 352 kind of based on that, because the way you talked about the way that sounded. So I know you've got that background with analog as well as the, being as young. You don't see that a lot with people your age. No offense. I mean, at all. I mean, you're 30. You're almost an old man. But
yeah,
I thought that was really cool. So you don't have a particular technology in an amp that you prefer necessarily from what
No,
I
I mean, personally for me, I mean, we all do, right? Audiophiles, we generalize things, class D sounds this way, class A sounds that way. But at the end of the day, how many products have I gotten in here to, squash that generalization, right?
Yeah.
So, for me, at the end of the day, if it sounds good, it sounds good. I don't care if it's class A, B, or class D. Those things don't matter to me as much.
No,
in terms of sound.
Absolutely.
Curious. It looks like you have a lot of vinyl. What do you like listening to on vinyl? Are you a jazz person, rock person? Like, what's your music taste? And do you prefer certain music on vinyl versus digital?
So actually, people ask me this question quite a bit. I actually have CD player, turntable, pure fidelity. I can't show it. Pure fidelity turntable.
Yep.
And also the reel to reel.
I love the reel to reel. That's
I love it. I absolutely love it. And
Yeah.
but it's expensive. Each piece of music is expensive.
Sure.
So I only have maybe 3 masters on there. I believe it's one step or a copy of a one step. But other times, really, the reason that I play different media isn't as much like because one sounds better than the other, but more so because of the music choices that I have. So, for example, LP, I started my LP journey playing turntables because of my grandfather and my mother passing down their a collection to me. So I needed something to play with. So I started with like Thorn's turntables, right? Something, and then that went down the rabbit hole there. But it was really to play music that wasn't available on streaming, and that's the same for CDs. So it's not so much one sounds better than the other. It's more of nostalgia for me and the music choices. So I don't want to limit my music choice based on availability. I want to be able to play my music freely. So that's the reason why. But of course, for me, I would say the reel to reel, really hits home sometimes. When I'm sitting back in my room and listening, that's probably my favorite. And the next, I would say I'm becoming more of an analog guy than I was before. I'm playing a lot more turntables, and I think that's thanks to Jason Thorpe as well from Soundstage. I have to shout him out. He gave me some great recommendations. I've been enjoying them. And so, I'm kind of adding to that collection that my grandfather and grandmother passed down to me. And that's, so just love it. Streaming actually, probably my last resort, to be honest.
We need to introduce him to Xavier.
I was just going to say that Captain Analog, man. He's crazy good at setting up turntables.
Yeah, he's amazing. When he calibrates a turntable, it's like 3 times better. And I'm not exaggerating. Gene can back me up on that.
Yeah, my Mariah's back here. He did
crazy.
Yeah, I personally, Jay, I like certain things. I like certain music on vinyl that I think it didn't transfer as well digitally. I like the 70s era jazz, 60s era jazz. I just think there's a quality to it on vinyl that it just didn't transfer as well digitally most cases. That's what I like. Now, not to get too far off topic, but when I was a kid, I had a poor man's reel to reel. You want to know what that was? A Super VHS. No, a Super VHS high speed, recorded way better than any 3-head tape deck. Sounded so freaking good. And then I looked it up years later. The signal to noise ratio is close to 90 dB on a Super VHS. So you're at almost reel to reel level quality for a much cheaper price. So too bad that nobody transferred music to Super VHS back in the day.
I don't think I've ever done it Super VHS.
What are you, Amish?
We're old school.
Come on, Gene. I'm older than you. No.
True, that's true. So someone's asking here, Parasound Halo or NAD Purify, which would you amplify these towers? The NAD amplifier doesn't care about the load. It doesn't matter if it's 8 ohms or 4 ohms. It's frequency, it's load invariant. It's very transparent. Parasound amplifiers could drive a fork. They're that good. I just republished my NAD 23 bench test. I turned it into a review. I put my subjective listening test. I compared it to my Anthem STR. I know there's going to be objectivists that say all amplifiers sound the same. Well, doing this for 25 years, I disagree. Okay, there are subtleties, there are differences in amplifiers.
Just like cables.
Yeah, right. We're talking about reality. I can actually measure these differences and understand why there are differences. And something like the Purify amplifier, the output impedance on that amp is so low, which means the damping factor is so high, which means the cone control is so precise that it actually sounds like there's less bass. When I first hooked up the NAD 23, I'm like, it sounds a little thin compared to my other amplifiers. I was like, I don't know if I like this. But then I started listening, and I hate to say black level, like OLED versus mini LED. Don, this is kind of your realm.
Yeah.
The black level or the silence of the Purify amplifier, because the noise,
it's like an OLED of amps. Yeah, it's very clean.
It sounded almost artificially clean. Yeah. So
but I mean, maybe not as engaging as like a micro LED with the brightness, and that's actually a pretty good analogy, because you know what I'm saying, some amps are just they do sound different. I'll argue that with anybody. I've heard differences for decades in different amplifiers.
Yeah,
I mean, it is what it is.
So Jay, give us a quick rundown. It looks like you're getting ready to review the 1528 bookshelf. How does that, obviously it's not going to sound as big as the tower, but is it tonality similar? Give us a little rundown of that before you publish your review, since you're here.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I'll say that it doesn't have the scale as the towers do. But for my room, you know, I mentioned why people were like, oh, you love the towers, then why don't you buy them? I said, if I had the room, I would, right? These speakers, I will most likely buy them. Now, I do want to hear the monitor version as well, but this
extra
woofer. By the way, this is a big bookshelf speaker. I mean, in this price range, I have a few speakers in here right now at this price range to compare, and they're all smaller. And that's one thing. Again, even bookshelves, you know, the bigger scale of sound and the extension of the bass, just from a bigger cabinet, is something that's kind of unmatched with this specific bookshelf speaker. And I mean, the bass that I'm hearing in my room is akin to the 1528 towers, which was something that I was like, what is going on here? The bass on these bookshelf speakers go down deep. I still don't have to turn on my subs. And for my personal taste, it has those subtleties and those bass textures that I really love. And it's faster. So the only thing that I feel like I'm sacrificing in my room versus the towers is really that scale of sound. And that's why I'm perfectly happy with buying this for now and settling with this, because really the scale of sound is the only thing that I'm like a little bit
well, they match your room better, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So for my room, this speaker just matches better, and it throws and one thing I'll say in favor of the 1528 towers is that it's such a big tower. I thought I wouldn't get the same kind of sound stage. I thought I would surely get more sound stage and, you know, spaciousness with a bookshelf speaker. Not the case. They're about the same. And you know, I think the key factor here is that I you know, maybe it's the crossover, maybe it's I haven't measured these speakers yet. I always do my subjective review notes first and then measure, so that I don't bias myself looking at the measurements. But I haven't measured these yet, but I'm pretty sure these measure a little bit more softer on the top end than the 1528 towers, because what I'm hearing is a little bit more subdued high frequency, which for me, I personally like. If I was to get the 1528 towers, I would have used those jumpers to put down the high frequency by about negative 2 dB anyways. So
well, let me ask you this, Jay. Here's a question for you that might explain it. Did you measure from the ground to the tweeter, the bookshelf on that? Is that an Arendal stand that they sent you?
Yeah, so those are prototype stands. There's a problem with those stands. That's just for aesthetics only. So I was taking some B-rolls before, and you know, they asked me to use the stands for aesthetic reason only, because they're big bookshelf speakers. Finding a stand for them is quite hard. But they had a production problem with those, so they're going to be redesigning the stands. Hopefully in a similar look, because I love the stands, the aesthetic aspect of it. But I didn't measure these speakers yet to make myself clear, Gene.
Well, I'm asking physically, like, I'm just wondering, is the tweeter level at the same height as a 1528 tower in your room?
Oh, no, absolutely not. The 1528 towers were like way up here, you know, pointing down at me. This is more like ear height, right?
So you're kind of listening at a different position now. So it's kind of may have shifted the spectral balance a little bit too.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, Gene, you're going to know soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Supposed to be 4 days.
I think you're gonna love it, Gene. I think you're gonna love it.
I'm looking forward to it for sure. Yeah, and and James, I can't wait for James to get the monitor version, which the monitor just adds an extra woofer. And here's the interesting thing, Jay, you may not realize this is people might think that 8-inch woofer is the same for each speaker, but it's not. They actually optimized the driver for the enclosure. So they didn't just take a common 8-inch woofer that they designed and put it in all the speakers for the whole lineup. They've customized those drivers for each application.
Yeah, there's very few companies.
I actually briefly mentioned that in my review.
Okay.
That the drivers may look similar, but it was actually specifically designed for the towers, which I thought was, again, there's not many companies that do that. So
there's a handful of them, like Dolly, Focal, Paradigm.
Right.
I think maybe Dyne Audio. I mean, companies that really have the ability to do that, and that does make a difference.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why manufacturers sometimes make their own drivers. A lot of it has to do with quality control. They want to make sure they have really tight tolerances and control over their designs. And I did that crossover video. I talked about that. They're maintaining the quality throughout. They're maintaining it through the manufacturing process, choosing tight tolerance parts. All that stuff matters because if you don't match the left and right speakers, it collapses your imaging. The ability to really precisely image has to do with matching those speakers, getting similar amplitude response, similar impedance, similar electricals, similar acousticals. It really does matter. And budget speakers have a harder time doing that than cost no object speakers like these.
Well, think about as you're designing a speaker and you've almost completed it and measured and done prototypes, but there's this little problem that you're having. By making and manufacturing your own drivers and being able to adjust that, you could usually adjust that with the design of the driver many times. And that there's power in that. There really is. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. So Jay, last question for you. What other $10,000 pair of speakers and up have you had in your studio recently that you would say that this is on the level or outperforms? I'm just curious because you are basically saying this might be the best speaker you've ever heard at that price point. I'm just kind of curious.
Correct.
What are the reference? What were your references prior?
So actually in my review and going forward in the years, because people were like, hey, you say everything is good. What is exactly, what do you think about this versus this, right? You said both is good. There's a bit of confusion naturally. So I actually came up with a tier list. It's not so much a tier list, but each price category, I would review something. I would put it as my reference if I find it exceptional. And then eventually it will get replaced, So if someone gets if another speaker comes in here that I find is better than the 1528 towers in value, in the sound that I hear, and measurements, all those aspects, then it will be replaced. So it's not like I'm in bed with a specific company for the tier list or the reference list. But in that list, I had the Joseph Crowley, the Borson X2 loudspeakers, right? And that was replaced by the 1528 tower speakers. And that was a shock to a lot of people because I really love the Borson X2s. But I was looking at it thinking, well, the size doesn't compare.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that the X2, I made this very clear. It's not that the X2 is not impressive for the price or that, it's a bad speaker. No, it's an excellent speaker. And those two have different sonic qualities. So one might choose the X2 over the other. My reference list is not an absolute for everybody. But for the value it provides, I thought it was a clear win. So it replaced the Borson X2. On that same list, I have another speaker. So I have two speakers at all times in the list. And one was the Rosso Fiorentino Soltado 2 loudspeakers. And those speakers are slim towers. So the reason I have those two speakers as my reference in that price category was because the slim tower of the Rosso Fiorentino serves a different purpose, right? In my room, in a smaller condo, it's a speaker, high quality speaker in that $10,000 price range that people will gravitate towards that can't have the Arendal 1528 towers. So it gives people choice when they look at my reference list. And above that, I actually have the Metal version 2 loudspeakers as my reference and the Joseph Crowley 15. There's a number 1528 or something like that. It's a horn loaded loudspeaker. And again, both speakers measure excellent. Both speakers sound different. One's a horn speaker, one's a metal dome speaker made with totem technology, torrent driver technology. Love both speakers to death. But if you really put them side by side, the 1528 towers, once again, wins in scale. So that was the key point in my review, is that where have I ever, or where have you ever seen a product at $9,500 US that is built this big with this much quality? Because usually when speakers are big, companies cheap out on some stuff like
it's
the
a flagship
material,
quality product.
Racing, exactly, crossover somewhere. I couldn't find it with this product. Everything was top notch at $9,500 for a speaker bigger than I've ever had in here. So to me, that was something, for people that have big rooms, an absolute standout, right? So that's kind of like the experience I had. And I even went far as to say it was comparable with speakers that I had experienced at the high-end retail store, right? Now, obviously, those speakers I didn't have in my room, but I've set up those speakers in clients' rooms, with my colleagues and so on. And setting them up, I've heard those speakers in various different rooms, and that gave me good insight to how those speakers respond and sound like in a different room. And we're not talking about $10,000 speakers here. We're talking about like 30, 40, 50 grand speakers, because we're getting to that big tower size. When I was handling this 1528 towers, both in listening tests and measurements and just hauling them around in my room, I had the same feeling as I did setting up those really, ridiculously expensive high-end speakers, right? Built to utmost quality and care to attention. And that's what I look for when I look at a product and say, hey, I think this is a standout, is when I look at every one of those details. I didn't find any details on the speaker that I found like, hey, okay, they kind of cheaped out on this one, go figure, price is lower. Nope, none of that. So I found that to be, exciting.
I mean, on today's market, $10,000 for essentially a flagship pair of speakers is pretty impressive. Most flagships.
Yeah, I mean, I had bookshelf speakers.
Yeah,
exactly. I had bookshelf speakers in here, like mini monitors for that money, right? And I love those speakers, but I mean,
I've measured speaker cables that cost more.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's I mean, and probably more. There's more speaker cables that cost like 10 grand and above.
Oh, way more.
And
way more.
Exactly. And the fact that you get this substantial box. I mean, have you seen the box for this? I mean, the box for this is ginormous. It's bigger than me. And I was like, holy crap, getting them out. By the way, the box, attention to detail with the box, when you're unboxing it, there's like these little clips. So you don't have to lift them out of the box, because you're not going to do that. You don't have to flip them over. You clip these, and then you lift the box, and there you go. You remove the foam. And if you see your friend in Florida, Michael.
Youthman.
Yeah, Youthman. Sorry. Youthman. He did an unboxing video, and actually, I have to thank Youthman, because when I was boxing them back up, I watched this video many times, and I was like, "Oh, that's how it goes back together, right?" But it's very intuitive for the most part, and it's very well packaged, and it's really hard pressed. Like I as someone who has, as done some speaker projects before with CSS Creative Sound Solutions, and bringing the Typhon project together, I know what goes into the packaging, right? Like the packaging itself of the speakers costs money, and that's somewhere you don't really want to cheap out. Yeah, you don't want to cheap out, because you don't want to damage the speakers. That's big money.
Well, Jay, the other thing too is they have a 60-day return policy, and
that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't even know,
right?
I don't even know how they're gonna be doing that, right? So like it's for me, as someone who has been on that side, I was scratching my head going, how the heck are these guys doing this? I need to find out. So yeah, I thought it was just an absolutely remarkable kind of achievement for the company. And that's
somebody
that's
who's
why
part of Norwegian, I know the secret sauce for that. Just saying.
Which is
the Viking.
I'm not telling you. Viking blood. That's what it is, Jay. It's Viking blood.
I forgot we had a super chat, so let me address that.
Oh,
sure.
ABX audio files for $9.99. Props to y'all for getting together and just sharing and discussing who you are in some cool gear. We need more of this. I agree, man. We should come together as a community and work together. And, because we all can't cover every product on the market, but Jay's covering products we're not covering. We're covering products he's not covering. In fact, I have an open invitation to Jay if he wants to do written reviews of some of his YouTube videos of products that I don't have. I need the content on Audioholics because that's
great.
where most of my effort goes is audioholics.com.
You gonna put him on a spot like that, Gene? Come on,
I'm
man.
putting you on the spot right here, Jay. Right here.
He's like, I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna get him on the stream.
We can't just have Shane Lee be the only Asian contributor to the website. We got to have multiple, right? We got to have diversity. So,
did you see that? Look at your text message. I just forwarded you one from Shane Lee. You'll like it.
Oh, okay. Well, Jay, I really appreciate you giving all the details on your experiences with this product. I hope this clears the air for some people, some critics of yours as well. We all got to have critics. We all have to, just stay positive and just do what you feel that you're doing is right. And you can't lose, man. You're just going to keep growing. Your channel's blowing up. I saw you maybe a couple of years ago when you were just getting started out. Now you have over 100,000 subscribers and your views are going up, so that you're doing the right thing. You've got the formula, man. That's why I'm very happy for you.
You're a class act, dude. I've been following you for a while and I enjoy your videos. I enjoy your knowledge. I know you come from that working where you did that really ultra high-end background around a lot of experienced people who I respect. I watch their videos too. And I dig it. I love the room that you built. And if you got enthusiasm because you love audio, I mean, I get super excited about
Don and I will be texting each other on the weekend, 2 o'clock in the morning. Dude, you got to listen to this, man. We start sending screenshots with Xavier. So look, 90% of the time I'm listening to music. I love home theater as well, but every system in my house is suited towards music.
We had a conversation tonight, Gene. I'm like, dude, I'm like 70% music. He's like, me too. I mean, I dig it, dude. And I appreciate that you're part of this generation that's really, and you're a class act. I'll say that, you don't act like an idiot.
And I truly appreciate it. Right. Sometimes I look at my videos and, I get why people, get pissed off because I'm because I'm describing sound stage, nuance, detail, but I really mean it. And get this, I actually listen to the system one more time, right, before I make the video, because it brings my mood up. It brings me back to that audiophile kind of mindset where I'm listening to the music and I can talk about the things that I just heard. But, again, I'm just trying to do my best. And I really appreciate you guys, having me on here to,
totally cool.
To talk about these things. And, I'm all for measurements as well as subjective, listening and sharing. And above all, I think everyone's on the same page here. We just want something that sounds good. And, we really enjoy this hobby and have a love for this industry and this hobby. And, I think that's the most important thing, and if people look at it from that kind of perspective, they will have maybe a little bit less negative, lens on their eyes.
No, for sure. Jay, I would like for you to get to know our Audioholics family with Teo. I think you and Matt Pose would be fast friends. He's our...
Oh, absolutely. I would love to.
Yeah, Matt Pose is a genius. He's PhD. I'm not supposed to say that, but he's just like a class act like you, super smart. I mean, we got James. I mean, we got Captain Analog. We got, Gene's cousin, Tony, who we love, Tony. I mean, we got a whole crew, Wade. I mean, everybody. It's just, and we're all huge music and gear nuts. I mean, we really are. I mean, it's not like we're all killing it, making money here. I mean, the deal, but, and to get hate for that, man, sometimes sucks, but it just let it blow off, dude. It's all good.
Well, good beans, man. I'm going to put a link to your video so you guys can watch Jay's full video. Jay, do you have a Patreon or no?
I do have a Patreon. It's a very small group of people, but they're very supportive, and I also want to thank them. I think I see some of them in the comments right now as well. Thanks for being here, guys. We like to chat, and that's kind of like my audio group, right? Again, one of the reasons I actually started doing this was because I wanted to make friends. I don't have a lot of friends that's audiophiles at my age, and I've met some. As much as I always kind of like, get, a little bit moody when I see negative comments, the vast majorities are positive comments, and the Patreons, I have some really supportive people, and met some really amazing, smart, sharp individuals in this industry that I'm very grateful for. So it's not all negative, and I'm so glad to have met Gene and yourself as well, Don. And, I look forward to, continuing our relationship.
Excellent, Jay. Appreciate it.
Reach out to my boy Joseph from Siphonics Audio. Joseph's pretty
cool. We hang out quite often as well.
Oh, you hang out? Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. He came down to Florida, man. So maybe we can talk him to coming back again, and we'll all get together and break bread. That'd be cool.
Small world. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
All right, guys. Well, last question I want to address, and then we'll wrap this up. Is someone's asking, is this a Dan Romer design? No, it's not. He had nothing to do with the 1528 series. So I just wanted, because I've seen this question a bunch of times. It's not. It's completely Arendal's design from the ground up.
But we love Dan Romer with all of our
love
heart.
him to death.
Love
yes,
him.
sure.
Love him like the best. Love him.
Well, guys, check out Jay's YouTube channel. Check out his review. Join his Patreon if you're not a patron. Give him some support for all the efforts that he does. I'll put some of our affiliate links down below if you guys want to support this channel. If you decide to buy some Arendal speakers, there's some links there. And hopefully we'll get our samples so we could do our take.
Yeah, I'd love to have a pair of them for review at some point, Arendal. I'm like, this is one I'm excited about. So,
well, Don, you could always come over to my house when I get them. You're gonna help me move them anyway. So,
You guys have to definitely text me, Gene. You know, what you guys think.
Gene lives like 15 minutes from me, so we're always, listening, and hanging out, and whatnot, eating, drinking.
Eating is important. Yes.
Being merry.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Guys, if you like this video, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon as well at patreon.com/AudioHawks. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.
Keep listening.